Listen up.
Very much. Again, apologies for the technical problems. We are getting reports the White House is asking reporters to evacuate from the White House. As Caitlin Collins is just outside, joins us now.
Danger, danger.
Yeah, Anderson, we were inside the White House. The Secret Service came around and asked for us to leave. That is something that I don't think has ever happened since I've been inside the White House. Often they say you can't go outside. The White House is on lockdown. Press was instructed to actually leave the White House grounds. And out here you can see there is a swarm of protesters out in front of the White House. There were reports that they were trying to take down the statue of Andrew Jackson that, of course, is in Lafayette Square right in front of the White House. And as we were walking back through here, we saw several protesters who said that they had fired some kind of substance at them. They weren't sure if it was tear gas, pepper spray. Of course, that was a big debate the last time they cleared the protesters. But I'm going to step out of the way, but you can see here the police have moved this barrier to where we are right now. Earlier today, this has not been where the barrier was. And there are several protesters standing around, several police officers here forming a bit of a haphazard line in front of the White House as we're waiting to figure out more details about what's going on. But clearly they believe there was some kind of threat happening, and that's why they had reporters leave the White House in that very unusual move, Anderson. And of course, this is the very spot I'm standing where they moved those protesters not that long ago, where they forcefully cleared them out of the way when the president made his walk right over here to St. John's Church next to me. So we're still learning a little bit more about what exactly is going on, what transpired, but definitely a much heavier police presence and protesters than you've seen here in the last several days.
So, Caitlin, just so you know, what we're seeing on the right of our screen from earlier, it looks like law enforcement personnel moving in to clear, I assume, the area around the statue. Can you just explain where you are, for those who aren't familiar, kind of with the layout of this? Is that the White House all the way in the back? And then is that the Jackson statue there also in the background?
Yeah, that's the Jackson statue. It's right there in the middle of the park. It's Andrew Jackson on a horse. Of course, that is Lafayette Park right in front of the White House. And so we're standing here on 16th Street right next to the church that, of course, the president had that infamous visit. And so that is the question, you know, as we've seen this debate raging over the last few days across the nation about these statues that are across the nation and what's going on. And there was something going on with that one. The police felt the need to move it. The question, of course, is how they moved these protesters, what tactics they used, and what the response of the protesters is going to be. Tensions definitely seem to be running higher than they have been in the last several weeks over here.
So Lafayette Square Park, that's been cleared of protesters?
Yeah, there is no one in Lafayette Park that is not a police officer at this moment. We're at this barrier. It's exactly where you saw the protesters standing when they forced them out so aggressively, of course, that infamous Monday. And so now police have come here. You can see these concrete barriers here in front of it, and it is police officers on bikes. You can see a few more, but the park right now has been cleared.
And
Andrew Jackson, the one that attacked the Native Americans, the Indian culture that basically was part of the genocide, and you would think that of all people would be sick of any statue being in Washington D.C. You'd think that the red man, but see, the red man was told to be settled. The red man was told to be grateful. The red man was told to be polite. The red man was told to be civilized. Now, who's the one who's uncivilized? Now, who's the one that is a barbarian? Now, who's the one that is asking for trouble? Now, who's the one that is in violation? It's one thing to protest, and I support all protesters, regardless of what they're protesting for. Even though they may not be protesting for something that I believe in, but I support all protesters. But to tear up monuments and to tear up stuff and to be nothing but a destructo, I do not support. I never have supported it, and I never will support it. But it's obvious that they're got their hands full up there in Washington, D.C. right now. And unless a person didn't want to spend time in the powwow, right now wouldn't be a good time to go to Washington, D.C. and go to protesting. And the next thing you know, you get falsely accused of being associated with a group that's promoting violence. And the next thing you know, you wind up in jail. Sad. Super, super sad. It is really sad that it has taken this to be able to get the attention of the rich man, the corrupt man, the forked tongue man.
And do you, approximately how many protesters would you say there are? Obviously, it's always hard in a situation like this, but
it's always hard, especially if you're on the ground, but we actually have been over here reporting a lot, so we have a pretty good idea when it's a lot of protesters. This is certainly, it's somewhere in the medium range, I would say. It's not as many as we've seen on some days where they fill this. This is, of course, where the street I'm standing on is where the D.C. mayor renamed it Black Lives Matter Plaza, and that's where you saw so many protesters and demonstrators over the last several weeks. But there's definitely a good amount of people around. Everyone seems to be watching, looking to see what it is exactly that's going on as they're waiting. And of course, the question is, do they move the protesters further back? How does that go? Because that was a decision they had to make the last time.
It's interesting that the White House, the Secret Service, chose to ask reporters to leave. It doesn't seem like at this stage there's an immediate threat on the White House itself.
No, and that's what's so unusual, because I'm telling you that I've been reporting on this White House since the day Donald Trump was inaugurated, and we have never been asked to physically leave the White House. They'll take us off of the front lawn. They will move us slightly indoors, keep us indoors if they think there's some kind of security threat, but they actually had us leave the entire White House grounds tonight, Emerson. So it's not clear why the Secret Service made that decision. We're obviously cleared now very far back from the White House, probably 200 yards back from the White House, as we're trying to figure out why the Secret Service made that decision to clear reporters out. A very, very unusual move.
Caitlin Collins, we'll continue to check back in with you. I want to turn our conversation now back to what we were discussing at the beginning of the hour, the phrase the president used to describe the coronavirus, and the racist phrase that he used, Kung Flu. Not only do many Asian Americans and others find it offensive, the phrase is being used at a time when the virus is fueling verbal and physical attacks on members of the Asian American community. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii. Senator Hirono, the term Kung Flu, when you heard the president say that, what did you think?
That he was racializing the virus and again raising anti-immigrant fervor. So this is what the president does. He's a very divisive person, and he's up against it, and so he uses these kinds of phrases. China virus, Kung Flu. Members of his administration have also used those terms, and he must know that there's a rise in harassment and outright physical attacks on Asian Americans in this country. He must know that, but of course, he takes no responsibility for what he says and what that might engender.
The White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, obviously defended the president, tried to equate the president's comment to the phrases China virus or Wuhan virus, which is an argument I don't quite understand. I mean, Kung Flu has nothing to do with the actual origin of the virus. They're not the same thing at all.
The problem is reality. It's not like the message, it's just the fact that things are...
It's like ransomware. In independent testing by AV Test, PC-Matic took first place with a perfect score in virus detection.
Polio in the U.S. and funded breakthrough treatments that have helped millions of moms and babies survive and thrive. But they won't win this battle without you. Please, call.
Lexi's point, you have this president who is really desperate and really excited about being in front of a big crowd of people. He wants to do that. But then you have his health officials saying, well, actually, we're probably going to have a second wave of the coronavirus. More people are going to die. Hundreds of, or I should say thousands of Americans have already died of the virus. But still, President Trump is leaning on these instincts to just do what he wants to do. So even though there might be people around the White House to take it more seriously than President Trump, ultimately, it's still the president's decision to go forth because he's posited himself as this kind of, I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to really buy into the pandemic too much.
This is
Don.
Back, President Trump is scheduled to visit Yuma, Arizona tomorrow to mark the completion of the 200th mile of the border wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Now, Acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf will be joining him along with Acting Deputy DHS Secretary Ken Cuccinelli and Customs and Border Protection Acting Commissioner Mark Morgan also expected to attend. Let's talk about it with Republican Mark Green from Homeland Security. You know, it's great to have you on, Congressman. There's a lot of hot debate about the border wall. Border officials keep telling us, yes, it helps. It stops crime, it stops human smuggling, it stops sex trafficking, it stops drugs. They say the border wall works. What do you say?
Absolutely, I agree 100%. And we have to listen to our professionals who do this every day. They know that that border wall, and I've actually been there several times and watched as the people, the wall sort of canalizes people into certain traffic areas, which then allows CBP to concentrate their limited personnel. And you've also got the 3rd Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division now right from my hometown on the border, providing observation and assisting the CBP people. So all of these assets combined, and the wall is a very important part of that, protect our southern border and protect people. They protect, you know, even the immigrants that are attempting to come into the country. It protects them too. So it's a good idea.
Yeah, we've been covering the border for years now. We have been covering how much fentanyl is crossing the southern border. You know, just a micro sample of fentanyl can kill so many people. Hard drugs crossing the border, child sex trafficking crossing the border, you know, and more. You know, women being assaulted at the border, and the crime south of the border per capita is higher than, you know, areas in the Middle East. Go ahead, Congressman.
Yeah, so when you think of just the amount of the fentanyl that's come across the southern border, it's an enormous amount. It's enough to kill millions of Americans. And we actually know that fentanyl is coming across not only at those border crossings, but other places as well. Clearly, the fence prevents that. It forces those people to use higher traffic areas. It equips CBP to be a part of stopping that fentanyl, stopping the sex trafficking, you know, stopping the cartels, which are trying to control that border. So having that border up, that wall is really important, clearly.
You know, your take on Democrats saying that this border wall is racist, when we have had immigrant communities members on our show, police, immigrant, and minority police officers,
About the incident, but tweeted last night he was incredibly saddened and called it a despicable act of racism and hatred, and a painful reminder of how much further we have to go as a society and how persistent we must be in the fight against racism. He went on to say, "This will not break me. I will not give in, nor will I back down. I will continue to proudly stand for what I believe in." Wallace's fellow drivers escorting his car today to the front of the grid and standing together for the national anthem. Wallace tweeting this selfie, writing, "Together." NASCAR also showed support, painting an "I stand with Bubba" hashtag in the infield. As the race began, Bubba Wallace's team gave him a pep talk over the radio.
You know, I love you, man. We all do. Take care of yourself out there. Put us in a good spot. Get yourself a deep breath. Get your mind right. Let's go shut these haters up.
Randy K.
So, Anderson, they're obviously trying to figure out who did this. And because there's been limited access to the track because of this pandemic, that may make their job just a little bit easier, because really it's just been essential employees like race teams and NASCAR employees. So the president of NASCAR says they are investigating, as you said, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, and the FBI. He wouldn't say whether or not security cameras around that stall number 43 might have picked up anything, but he did say, Anderson, that they have ramped up security around Bubba Wallace himself. They are concerned about his safety. In fact, they let his team inspect his car today before the race to make sure it hadn't been tampered with. And speaking of the race, Anderson, it has ended. Bubba Wallace came in 14th, but he said, quote, all in all, we won today. Anderson, back to you.
Randy K. Randy, thanks very much. And to everyone just joining us, Chris Cuomo is off tonight. We have breaking news. Reporters have been asked to leave the White House. We want to go back to our Caitlin Collins, who's just now across the street. Caitlin, if you can, just for viewers who are joining us at the top of the hour, explain what's been happening.